change in Alameda County. When I ran in 2017, when we started, we were the first campaign to challenge the sitting district attorney since 1966, which is 55 years, and that's huge. But because of that challenge, many of the things that had gone unnoticed and undiscussed were brought to the table. And so for that, I thank all of you for your courage and your vision in seeing that change was possible and that change was necessary in 2018. For those who don't know my story, I'm a civil rights attorney. I've been in this community for 30 years, representing everyday people, fighting big cases, little cases, successfully arguing against racial harassment in the United States Supreme Court, creating new laws to stop sexual harassment in both education and employment. I'm a native of Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm a survivor of the Ohio juvenile justice and foster care system, and I literally made it from the streets of Cincinnati to Yale College by the grace of God. I'm a person that knows that education is a game changer and that people just reaching out to one another and taking care of our young people is something that is absolutely essential and fundamentally missing in our criminal justice system. I came to California to go to law school, and I was able to stay here, and I was embraced by Alameda County and have had the privilege and honor of being a successful lawyer in this community for 30 years. As most of you know, I'm also a member of the Alameda County Democratic Party Central Committee, having been elected to that body with the most votes ever across this county in 2016 and 2020. And what that has meant is that we are moving the needle there as well. And while you guys are not an official chartered club of the Central Committee, it is important to recognize that your presence in the county has an influence and has had an influence that we've recently seen on some of the thoughts and the actions taken by that body. I am particularly honored to have been supported by this club because it recognizes that the position of the district attorney is one that has an impact across the county, and that justice should not depend upon your race, your religion, your ethnicity, or your zip code, most fundamentally. And the areas that you all come from and that you represent are vitally important to how we administer justice in Alameda County. And so I'm honored to once again come before you, and I'm looking forward to being in partnership with you as we move forward. This criminal justice system is broken. There's no question. Everyone in the race admits that it's a broken system. The question is who has the courage and the tenacity and the wisdom, quite frankly, to make a change and to make it work for Alameda County. I'm a person that's been committed to this county. I've been an activist in this community, and I believe that public safety requires public trust, and that is only through a partnership with the community that we will be able to reclaim our criminal justice system around and make it work so that it doesn't undermine public safety, but that it actually increases public safety in every community. And so I look forward to today's debate. And again, thank you for having us.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. We'll be moving on to Seth. You have the floor.
Thank you, Fund Progressives, for putting together this forum. I'm honored and excited to be here. I am running for district attorney for the same reason that I decided to go to law school, to make communities safer and more just. Over 20 years ago, I was working in the San Francisco mayor's office, and we had a campaign to reduce violence. And there were a number of murders that had happened in the Fillmore neighborhood, a historically African-American neighborhood. And the plan was to put out a reward, quite a substantial reward, for anything that led to the arrest, prosecution, and conviction of people involved in various murders. And the posters that we put up had the victims' photos of them, and we put them all over the community. And one night I was giving a presentation about this program at the police station, the Fillmore police station. It's called Northern, right there on Turk Street. And this conversation, after the end of the conversation, I thought I did a great job. At the end of the conversation, there was an older African-American woman. She came up to me. She looked me dead in the eye and she said, "What are you doing about the death of my grandson?" And no matter what I said, it wasn't going to be enough. And so I had to do more. I decided to go to law school. I decided to become a prosecutor. I was hired by now our vice president, Kamala Harris, to be a prosecutor. And I prosecuted various types of cases, domestic violence, arson, hate crimes, general felonies, including things like robberies and burglaries and thefts and carjackings and kidnappings. And while I was working as a prosecutor, I earned a degree from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. And while I was there, two men decided to blow up the Boston Marathon. And based on that incident and a number of other things, I decided to join the Air Force. And for the last 8 years, I have been a flight engineer on a combat search and rescue helicopter, part-time out of Moffett Field in Mountain View. I got deployed to both Iraq and later to Kenya. The motto for Air Force Rescue is "These things we do that others may live." And I bring that same level of commitment to being a veteran, a public school teacher, a prosecutor, and a policy leader. I also became a teacher. I taught criminal law at Oakland Technical High School and at City College of San Francisco, because we know that when you catch people at the front end, you don't have to catch them at the back end. We know that increasing the high school graduation rate decreases the crime rate. My current role is I serve as Chief of Staff for Oakland City Council member Dan Call. There, I drafted legislation that banned chokeholds and carotid restraints by the Oakland Police Department. Just recently, the Oakland City Council passed legislation that I was fortunate enough to work on that banned ghost guns and ghost gun kits in the city of Oakland. I want to bring all of those things to Alameda County to make Alameda County safer and more just. As a proven prosecutor, decorated veteran, public school teacher, and policy leader, my lived experiences give me a distinct viewpoint and understanding of the criminal justice system and the district attorney's office. The system is broken, and the DA's office is a part of that system. I am joining a wave of district attorneys who are changing the criminal justice system across the country. In Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Manhattan, Portland, Oregon, and Contra Costa County, all those communities have said enough, that we want change. We need change. And I'm here to be a part of that change in Alameda County. As district attorney, I will make sure that our resources are focused on violent crime. I'll try to send as many low-level cases to alternative courts, to expand the types of cases that can go to diversion, to increase public safety, to lead outside of the courtroom, to bring innovative solutions and address the roots of crime, the roots of all crime. You will hear from all of us today. And when you do, ask yourself, who is the best person to bring change to the system? Thank you for your time. My name is Seth Stewart, and I look forward to the opportunity to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Seth, for that. We're moving on to Mr. Wilson. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jimmy Wilson. Thank you, Fund Progressive, for hosting tonight's forum. I appreciate the time that you're giving us to speak to you tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, our community is in crisis. Our house is broken. Politics have never been my plan. I've been in the DA's office for about 17 years as a prosecutor. I stand up for our community because I care about this community. I'm running for Alameda County District Attorney because we need to move in a different direction. We need to put politics in the past, and we need to control crime. Ladies and gentlemen, people are losing confidence in our criminal justice system. The reality is that the Alameda County District Attorney's office is falling apart, and it's time for a change. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I started in this office around 40 years old. I used to be a plumber. I went to law school at night. raised 3 kids. I've been an Oakland resident for about 38 years. I came into the DA's office. I always say my moral compass was already set. The reality that I learned through my time in the office is that we are failing the community. The district attorney's office has lost its moral compass, and the public is questioning our ethics and our professionalism. Crime in our community is out of control, and our office has no plan on how to fix it. Guns have proliferated our street, violent crime, homicides have reached an historic high. Small businesses are closing because they can't afford to shoulder the cost. Ladies and gentlemen, as I walk around our community and I talk to residents and business owners, I come away with the same information, that the DA's office is detached from our community, that our leaders do not talk to people in the community. They do not talk to business owners. They're not aware of the problems that they're facing. Let me give you a little insight of what's going on right now. For the past 10 years, Oakland has 500 unsolved homicides. Imagine that, 500 homicides unsolved. That is a failure of leadership. That's a failure of our office. Just yesterday, I visited Camp Sweeney, a minimum security residential program for adolescents. And I was shocked to hear that no DA has ever been to that facility. And as I listened to the children and the counselors at Camp Sweeney, I came away with listening to their frustration and understanding that we need a better system. They want accountability for our youth. They want to stop the revolving door of the juvenile justice system. Ladies and gentlemen, victims and witnesses have lost confidence in our ability to serve them. And we need to change. We need to be better. We need better leadership. The DA's office needs to partner with the community. They need to partner with police. They need to partner with the defense bar. They need to partner with the judiciary. They need to get out in the community and help people reach their goal of being safe. We need new leadership in the district attorney's office. We need law enforcement that has integrity, ethics, and honesty. We must put safety over politics. We should feel productive and hold people accountable. We need to train our police officers to prevent unnecessary police and community conflict. I grew up in a pretty tough neighborhood in Bayview, Hunters Point. I saw guns, I saw death, I saw epidemics of violence. I grew up with parents who were community organizers who taught me how to give back to my community, to engage my community. During my time in the DA's office, that's what I have done. I started in 2004 under Tom Orloff, and we were not a perfect DA's office, but we never lost sight of what we should be doing. Ladies and gentlemen, I've worked tirelessly to build a reputation as a hardworking prosecutor. I'm the only candidate in this race who's tried some of the most violent and heinous crimes that you can ever think of. I'm a member of Ceasefire. I represent myself from the NAACP. We train police officers. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you for your vote. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And lastly, we have Mr. Wiley. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Fun Progressives, thank you for having us tonight. Thank you for 5 minutes to give you an idea of who we are and what we represent. My name is Terry Wiley. I'm the Chief Assistant District Attorney of the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. I've been with the District Attorney's Office for 32 years, and what my candidacy represents is safety and justice. One justice for all, a system that treats everyone fairly and protects everyone. You know, I come from a family where I'm the youngest of 12 kids. I was raised in East San Jose, which was primarily African-American, Hispanic area. It was a very challenging area to grow up in. So we faced all of the challenges that you generally face in low-income neighborhoods. So, you know, I understand what it feels like to be the underdog. You know, from there, I knew, like many of us, that education was my ticket to a better life. And fortunately, I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, then went to law school and started in the DA's office in 1990. Kamala Harris was in my clerk class that I started with, and we got our basic training in the DA's office. You know, I've tried some of the most violent crimes in the history of Alameda County. But in addition to trying violent crimes, car burglaries, sexual assaults, rapes, any number of different cases, I also was the prosecutor assigned to the Ryder's case involving police corruption. And that was a case where you had to, it was in an environment where police officers did no wrong, and it was a very challenging case to take on. And the result of that case was that the Oakland Police Department went on federal oversight because of unconstitutional policing. And so that was a positive result, because I think today the Oakland Police Department is a better department as a result of our efforts. And, you know, when I was prosecuting a lot of these cases during the 90s, this was during the drug wars of the 90s. And this was probably the most violent era of Oakland, where they were averaging 190 murders a year. But my career has been one of the most groundbreaking careers in the history of Alameda County, in that I'm the first African-American chief assistant in the history of Alameda County. I'm also the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I created the implicit bias training that all employees of the district attorney's office must now go through if you are a member of our office. I'm also the director of HR. Outside of the district attorney's office in 2016, I was appointed to the State Bar of California Board of Trustees. I also sit on the ABA's Criminal Standards Committee. And this is the prestigious committee where we set the criminal standards for both federal and state prosecutors and defense attorneys. This is why I've been endorsed by Congressman Eric Swalwell, Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf. The DAs in our office were addressed by myself, Ms. Price, and Mr. Wilson. And after we addressed them, I won the endorsement of the current DAs in a landslide, because they are familiar with my leadership. When we went in front of labor, Mr. Wilson is a plumber, but the plumbers union endorsed me, because when all was said and done, they said that's the candidate that has the knowledge, that has the ideas, and is the person to lead the district attorney's office in the future. Because what I want to do is address violent crime. And I'm going to do that by creating the Crime Strategies Unit. And this is a unit that we will pair with the ceasefire unit of the Oakland Police Department, and where we will address the 1,700 individuals in Alameda County that are driving 80% of the violent crime in our county. They're the ones that are responsible for 80% of the murders, 80% of the violent shootings that are occurring in our county. And we have a plan to address these individuals causing the majority of that violence. And when it comes to the juvenile division, I ran the juvenile division between 2013 and 2017. We were constantly over at Camp Sweeney. And between 2013 and 2017, the incarceration rates of juveniles dropped by 70% under my leadership, which is why I was recently honored by the Boys and Girls Club of Oakland with the Game Changer Award. I was also honored by the National Bar Association with the Heman Sweat Civil Rights Award. And let me just finally say, I know my time is up. I've also been endorsed by the leading civil rights attorneys in this country, including Ms. Price's former law partner, John Burris, Benjamin Crump, who represented the family of Breonna Taylor.
I'm sorry, we've reached our 5-minute mark. Sorry to cut you off there. But there'll be plenty of time to respond in the questions. We're going to move on to round one. These are our common questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes maximum to answer, and we ask that you please respect it. Most folks want to go enjoy their Sunday evenings. Yes, we'll start off with the first question, which is, please tell us what your view of the district attorney's job is. And we're going to start with Mr. Stewart. You will have 2 minutes to respond.
So the role of the district attorney is the chief law enforcement officer of the entire county. And this is actually a critical distinction that I want to make. The district attorney has the power to choose who gets charged and what they get charged with. They have that sole power. So it's critical that they use discretion and intelligence and wisdom when making these decisions. As district attorney and as a member of Air Force Rescue, I live by the values of service, excellence, and fairness. And we need to bring those values to the district attorney's office when making decisions about who to prosecute and what to charge them with. I'd also just like to briefly point out that I put together a 12-point platform, and that platform outlines exactly the type of things that I think are critical for the district attorney's office to focus on. We need to be smarter on crime, and we need to follow the science. We need to make robust investments in data. We need to use those data and research to drive our prosecution and sentencing policies. We need to focus on violent crime. We need to lead outside of the courtroom. We need to fight racism and bias, whether it be in hate crimes, whether it be by members of law enforcement. We need to work with the members of law enforcement to increase training programs to help them become better citizens and guardians, as opposed to imposing or enforcing armies. In addition to that, we also need to prosecute criminal behavior by law enforcement. If we do all of those things, we will make a significant impact in Alameda County. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Wilson, you're next. And from now on, I'm just gonna put in the chat who's next, so there's no lag. I think you're still muted. Yeah, we still can't hear you. All right. While we, I guess, figure that out, we might as well move on to the next candidate. That would be you, Mr. Wiley.
I think the role of the district attorney is the chief law enforcement officer of the county of Alameda, but I think you have to look at it in really two ways, because the role of the district attorney is to lead in policies of the district attorney's office, but you also have to be prepared to lead on the business side of the district attorney's office, because the district attorney's office has a budget of about $100 million. So not only do you have to manage the criminal division budget, but we also rely on a number of grant funding for a lot of our programs. And so you have to be somewhat versed in grant funding in order to get the whole $100 million that's needed to run the district attorney's office. Now, when it comes to policy, our policy will be one of safety and justice. We will be focused on protecting the community, which is why I went and met with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office to go over their crime strategies unit, which is one of the most effective units in the country for combating violent crime. And it is a data-driven program, and we will be a very data-driven prosecutor's office as it relates to dealing with the violent criminals in Alameda County. But it's also important that we focus on some of the low-level offenses and get to the origins of many of those crimes, such as drug dependence, some of the mental health issues, and poverty that are driving some of these crimes, but also bake into the alternatives to incarceration a healthy dose of accountability. Because without accountability in those programs, they're not going to be successful. So we represent the new voice in our criminal justice system and the best qualified person to lead the district.
Great. And Mr. Wilson, can we hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. All right, your time starts now.
Thank you. Yes, the district attorney is the moral compass and of the community and the leader of the law enforcement community, but it doesn't stop there. A district attorney has to be proactive in reducing crime and serving victims. We work for the public. We are public servants, duty to do our jobs ethically and to do them honestly. I can tell you, based on what I know of all the candidates, I'm the only candidate who has the history and the experience in dealing with violent crime, and also who's been proactively working with law enforcement for them to do their jobs better. I'm a member of the South County branch of the NAACP. We are right now proactively teaching police officers around the country about community policing and implicit bias. That's something that my office refused to do. We have been proactively out there. We've talked to the Hayward Police Department, San Leandro Police Department, BART Police. We are currently teaching the Alameda Police Department, the Hayward Police, talking about proactively working within the system to make it better. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the job of the district attorney to reduce crime in this community. That is not happening. We are passively watching it happen. I don't care what they are doing in Manhattan. I am telling you right now, when you're a 30-year or 17-year prosecutor and you don't have the ability to know how to reduce crime in your neighborhood, in your community, then you're not a leader. We need leadership, and that is the job of the district attorney in this county.
Great, thank you. Pamela, you're last.
Sure. The role of the district attorney in Alameda County under my administration will be to serve as a minister of justice to this community. The district attorney is not a law enforcement trained officer. The district attorney is a lawyer trained in the law and takes an oath to uphold and enforce the Constitution across this county. And that is what the primary service role is of the district attorney. The district attorney's job is to develop and maintain a criminal justice system that treats everyone fairly, that operates efficiently, that reduces criminal activity, that prioritizes the safety of every family, community member, every member of this community, regardless of their race, their national origin, their religion, their zip code, and fundamentally to be a leader that requires every lawyer in her office to follow the Constitution, to respect the people whom we serve, and treat everyone with dignity and compassion. That is the role of the district attorney in Alameda County that we can see clearly. Those are the values of this county. We have said over and over again, we don't want the death penalty. We don't want juveniles tried as adults. We are not in favor of 3 strikes. The policies that this office has been built on and has thrived on, we're going to change all of that. Fundamentally, with respect to law enforcement, the district attorney has a duty to guide, to train, to direct, and to hold accountable law enforcement agencies across the county. I have trained law enforcement in diversity years and years ago. I have held these institutions accountable. That is the role of the district attorney.
Great, thank you for those answers, candidates. We'll be moving on to our second question in round 1, which I've just posted in the chat, but also read aloud, which is, we often talk about, and I think several of the candidates have mentioned how our system is broken and how the statistics back that up. But it ultimately comes down to one question, is why is our current judicial system racist and classist? To provide an explanation for that, in your opinion. And we'll start off with Mr. Wilson. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well,
I think you went back on mute.
can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Sorry, my internet is messing up. what is the origin of the criminal justice system? Well, when we look back at our history, we know that the criminal justice system came out of pre-slavery times, actually, and most of the reaction to the criminal justice system was post-slavery. The reason why there's so much implicit bias and racism in the system itself is that usually people of color, poor people have not been involved in the system. They haven't had an input into the system. And give you an example of it, I've served on 5 juries over my time. When I was a plumber, the last jury I was on was a murder case in the city of San Francisco. I looked around the room and the only people sitting there who looked like me, Black individuals, were the 2 defendants. No one else, including the judge, the clerks, no one else was African-American. And it took me back to a time when we think about the justice system and think about how Blacks and other people of color could not participate in the system. And that's historical. It's been that way through time. And what we need to do and how we need to change is that we need to get more people involved, people of color, people with more diversity, to change the system, to make the system better. When I talk about diversity, I don't mean diversity of just the way you look, but I think it's diversity of thought.
Great, thank you. Mr. Wiley, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, I think that anyone who has any knowledge of our history knows that there has been systemic racism in not only our criminal justice system, but just in our American society. And and when it comes to our criminal justice system, you know, George Floyd played out in front of on the televisions of the nation. So I think that there has to be an acknowledgement that there are still issues that we are having to overcome within our criminal justice system. And that's why I think it's important that as a leader in the district attorney's office, it's not only important that, you know, we educate the public, but it's important that we have our own house in order in terms of implicit bias, because we're making decisions that impact people's lives, their ability to walk around this community free. And we make decisions that impact individuals' liberty every day. So it's important that we're aware of our own implicit biases, which is why the implicit bias training that I put together, Module 2 focuses on the policy of redlining, where we show our employees how it is through systemic government action in the 30s that redlined areas in Oakland, for example, of West Oakland and East Oakland, and how these areas were limited in the economic investment that could be made into these areas. And then you fast forward to today, and you see that these areas that were redlined in the 30s and in the 20s and the 30s are the areas where we see a lot of still today, a lot of the socioeconomic problems that bring on a lot of the crime that we see. And the whole point we want to make to every employee of the DA's office is that simply because a case comes across your desk from West Oakland or East Oakland, know that those cases are not coming there simply because Black people live there. There's a lot of systemic government and action and private action that contributed to these areas. That's what leadership is as the district attorney of Alameda.
Great, thank you. And Pamela, you're up.
Sure, thank you. Can we start the clock over again, Ms. Kelsey? Thank you. I need those 8 seconds. Thank you. So let's talk about Alameda County. And I feel incredibly qualified to talk about this because I've looked at the history of Alameda County's criminal justice system. And yes, it is burdened with the stain of racism from the vestiges of slavery through the 1940s and the 50s. But our history goes even further back from the 1920s, where this system has been passed down and allowed to remain essentially static. When Earl Warren left in 1939, His successor was a man named Ralph Hoyt, and then Ralph Hoyt left in 1947, and his successor was a man named J. Frank Coakley, who was notorious for refusing to hold police accountable and for his racist views. His successor was a man named D. Lowell Jensen, who also was well known to be incredibly racist as a judge in this county. His successor was John J. Meehan. And his successor was Tom Orloff, and his successor was Nancy O'Malley. And so we are living under a criminal justice system in Alameda County that has been passed down since the 1930s. The last person to challenge this system was a civil rights lawyer named Bob Truehalf in 1966, and he did so based on the pattern of police brutality and racial harassment and discrimination that was pervasive and blatant in the Alameda County criminal justice system. And for the last 55 years, no one has done anything about that until we ran in 2017. When you don't have a challenge, you don't have transparency, you don't have accountability, and you certainly have no equity. That is the foundation and the legacy of the Alameda County criminal justice system.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Mr. Stewart.
Why is our current judicial system racist and classist? Because people think that it's okay. Because people think that this is okay. Let me just give a little bit of background information. Until 1986, it was okay to strike jurors based on the color of their skin. There was a case called Batson versus Kentucky that then stopped that practice. But until then, it was okay. People thought that that was okay. Here, right now in Alameda County and in the state of California, Black men are incarcerated in state prisons at 10 times the rate of white men. And people think that's okay. Also, 2021 was the deadliest year on record for transgender people. Asian hate crimes have increased 107% in the state of California, and people think that that's okay. The Ella Baker Center published a report last year noting that youth of color make up 100% of those held in Camp Sweeney and 92% of those held in juvenile hall. And people think that that's okay. It's not okay. We need to create policies to change this. We need to implement a system where these things no longer occur. I will create a task force that develops policies and eliminates disparities in case charging and sentencing decisions. We will engage in robust recruitment. We will recruit at historically Black colleges and universities and law schools and top 20 schools and Bay Area schools to make sure that we have the most diverse, effective lawyers that are in Alameda County, period, and be able to fight bias and discrimination. And finally, we will make a focus on hate crimes. We will end Asian hate and end hate crimes here in Alameda County. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for those responses, candidates. We'll be moving on to our next and final question in round one. And I posted it in the chat for everybody else. I'll also read it aloud, which is, how do we end this vicious cycle of criminalizing vulnerable communities? For example, our at-risk youth, the mentally ill, as the main gateway for providing them services. And we'll start with Mr. Wiley.
Thank you. That's a great question. And I have a few things that I want to address. I'm the only one candidate that has run our juvenile division. And as I stated earlier, we've lowered the incarceration rates of juveniles by 70% between 2013 and 2017. And that today in 2022, the Alameda County Juvenile Hall averages only about 85 kids that are in custody at the hall. And those are the kids that are there for murder, robbery, rape, and only the most serious violent offenses are in custody in our current juvenile system. And we have quite a number of programs that we are, that between the cooperation between the DA's office and probation, that we've implemented And it has contributed greatly to the number of juveniles that are incarcerated in the system. Now, when you talk about mental illness, the district attorney's office created the CARES program, where we're now training all the police agencies that make arrests involving individuals with mental illness issues to take them to the CARES program that we've created, where we have an on-staff psychologist, a person with a lived experience who's either made it back from drug addiction or mental crisis themselves, to assist with the person that we bring to the center. We also have clothing, food for the individual, and then more importantly, we try to find them a bed if they need additional mental health treatment. The Board of Supervisors of Alameda County was so impressed with the results of our CARES program that they've asked the Susan Maranishi, the county administrator, to find $2 million so that they can create 2 more CARES programs in the south part of the county. So we're working very hard to address these issues.
Great, thank you. Pamela, you're up next.
What was the question? I apologize.
Oh, did you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Essentially, we're asking, how do we end this cycle of criminalizing vulnerable communities, mentally ill or at-risk youth, and what are some services that you would provide as a DA?
Thank you. We need new leadership in the DA's office, and that has been apparent for as long as we've been focused on bringing change to Alameda County. In fact, in 2014, while Mr. Wiley was over the juvenile division, Alameda County was one of only 9 counties in California where the only children charged as adults were Black or brown children. Between 2010 and 2016, a Black child was 65 times more likely to be charged as an adult, and a Latino child was 27 times more likely during that period, 2010 to 2016, to be charged as an adult. And California voters overwhelmingly, including Alameda County, voted to stop the DAs from having the power to charge juveniles as adults. I fully supported that legislation, and the DA can bring and support more legislation to stop criminalizing our youth. We will expand our youth courts. We will establish an age-appropriate court for young people up to the age of 25, because the science tells us, the brain science tells us, that we have to have a different standard for young people up to that age. In terms of mental health, I'm fully committed to working with the families of seriously mentally ill, as well as the Department of Justice, to make sure that we in Alameda County create community-based options and more hospital beds for people who need them. We really need a leader that is focused on what are the issues that this criminal justice system has created and the injustices that have been perpetuated against vulnerable communities, against those suffering from mental health or addiction, against Black and brown children, and who's willing to take that on as an issue and remedy it.
Thank you. And we have Mr. Stewart next.
So I'd like to just talk about a number of things that come to mind when we're talking about vulnerable communities. We're definitely talking about young people. We're definitely talking about people that have mental health challenges. And we were talking about immigrant communities. These things are incredible. The Alameda County is the most diverse county in the entire Bay Area. 30% of the people who live here are from another country. Fremont, Union City, and Newark are very diverse places, and we need to be able to protect the immigrant communities in all of our cities and be able to provide resources, whether it's language services, whether it's culturally informed services for victims. All of these things are necessary where the DA's office needs to be able to show up. In addition to that, I completely agree that we also need to not charge youth as adults. In addition to that, with regard to mentally challenged individuals, we need to expand what happens in Alameda County. There's a mobile crisis team, there's a mobile evaluation team, and a community assessment and transportation team. Their hours for the mobile crisis team are only Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then the mobile evaluation team is only Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Basically, you can only have a mental crisis during those hours, and that's how you get those services. We have to expand that. We have to make sure that the county jail, Santa Rita, is no longer the biggest mental health care provider in the county. That can't happen. I completely agree with the consent decree that was just entered into, that we have to make sure that the unconstitutional services change and that the people in the Santa Rita jail now get the constitutional services that they deserve. We need to be able to provide these services for everybody who's suffering from a mental health challenge, to be able to get them out of the system and make sure that prosecution is not the only tool that we have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Wilson.
You know, the history of criminal justice in Alameda County and throughout the country for the last 30 years has been around mass incarceration. That has been the tool that most DA's offices use when deciding what to do with individuals who are accused of committing crimes. I can tell you that that has never worked, and it would not work. It certainly doesn't work with juveniles. In fact, it makes juveniles worse than it would have had we had some other kind of system. I believe that we need to divert more juvenile cases. We need to stop criminalizing minor offenses and putting kids through the system. What I am talking about doing is a community-based diversion program, a program where police officers, instead of booking a young man or a young lady, can take them to the station and call their parents. And then once they alert their parents, they can divert them into a community-based program to fit their needs. I believe in individualized justice. I'm not saying that works for every case, because some cases are extremely violent, but in the cases where a kid commits some offense like vandalism or trespassing or theft or things where there isn't the heavy violence, we need to do more. We need to provide resources for our youth to get them out of the system, because if we don't, that revolving door is going to keep on going. I can tell you that the only reason why there has been a reduction in juvenile hall is exactly what Ms. Price has said, is that the legislature took it away from the DAs to be able to directly file, to send kids directly into adult court.
Great, thank you for those answers, candidates. We'll be moving to our round two. This is our uncommon question segment. Each candidate will still have 2 minutes to respond. I put the first question in the chat. I'm also going to read it aloud. Often district attorneys are seen as charging and prosecuting violent crimes and property crimes. But what can the role of a district attorney play in protecting our economy and environment? And we'll begin with Ms. Price.
So, two-part question. With respect to the economy, we know that economic inequality is a threat to the economy of the country as well as Alameda County. And the district attorney has an important role in trying to level the playing field for people who are have been less able to participate in the economic system. For instance, AB 2338 is an opportunity for those who have felony convictions or some even misdemeanor convictions to be able to get licenses. And that's something that the district attorney can play a significant role in making sure that those who have been impacted by the criminal justice system and adversely affected economically now are able to participate and to benefit from that law. And so I think that the district attorney has an important role to play in terms of leveling the economic playing field, fighting for living wages, supporting fair hiring practices and housing practices. Those things are critical to creating an economy that people actually can benefit and participate and benefit from. The district attorney also has a critical role to play in the environmental area. As your question alludes to, most recently we've had the Attorney General had to come in and file a lawsuit against ABI Foundry, which is in East Oakland and has been polluting East Oakland for decades. I live in East Oakland. Nancy O'Malley has done nothing to protect my community from the type of air pollution and the metals that have polluted our air for decades. And yet that's a ripe area for the district attorney to hold people accountable. And the tools are there, the laws are there. Also in the area of housing, the district attorney, I believe, has an important role to play to help people maintain their housing and fighting on and landlords that violate the civil code.
Great. Thank you for that. Mr. Stewart, you have the floor.
I was fortunate enough to meet with a number of business leaders last week and had a conversation about how crime has affected their businesses. They talked about how, in particular, they have to shut down early. They're worried about their customers are not coming in. They're worried about the customers explain that they're scared. And I had lunch with a friend of mine, and she said that she separates her key from her purse when she walks around because she's worried that somebody's going to steal her purse when she's going anywhere, and she's afraid she's going to get robbed. This obviously affects everybody in terms of people feeling unsafe. And the way to fix that is to make sure that we focus on violent crimes, that we make sure people feel safe, and that we fight racism and we fight bias. We know that when Chinatown is attacked, that when older individuals are harmed because of who they are, who they love, or where they're from, it stifles community. It stifles economic community, it stifles investment. And we need to be able to protect our communities to be able to give them an opportunity to thrive and be successful. And the DA's office is exactly the office to do just that. With regard to the environment, I'm lucky I have an avocado tree in my backyard, but I live in West Oakland, so that means that I can't eat the avocados off the tree because the soil is no good. We need to be able to prosecute the groups and organizations that damage our communities, that make it impossible for us to literally bear the fruit and eat the fruit off our own trees. And the DA's office has the tools to do just that and needs to prosecute those organizations and groups that have defiled our environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, you have the floor.
Let's talk honestly what's going on in our community. Crime is out of control. And because it's out of control, small businesses are going under at an astronomical rate. A couple of months ago, I spoke to a gentleman who runs a lumber yard that's across the street from Home Depot on High Street. He employs about 80 people from the community. He gets robbed every weekend. Every weekend, someone breaks into his business. He told me that he feels like his business is gonna go under. He can't maintain his bottom line. If he leaves, that's 80 unemployed people from Alameda County. I've also spoken to people in the cannabis industry who provide somewhere in the neighborhood of $13 million a year in taxes and fees to the city of Oakland and all around Alameda County. And they, again, are frustrated with the high level of crime that's going on in our community. And the district attorney's office has no mechanisms on how to fix that. I come from a disadvantaged community, Bayview Hunters Point. They polluted our community with like pollution, with like soil that was contaminated. And there's a higher rate of cancer within my community. Black, brown, and poor people suffer the brunt of what it is when we talk about pollution in our community. I can tell you right now that leads to illiteracy, it leads to unemployment, it leads to higher healthcare costs. The district attorney they must enforce those laws. They must enforce the law to keep people safe.
Perfect. Mr. Wiley.
Yes, thank you. First of all, this is a great question, but I got two areas that I'd like to address. From the position of the district attorney's office, there is quite a bit that we can do. And one of the things is what I did. Coming into the district attorney's office in the 1990s, anyone who's been in the DA's office for 30 years, you were part of the system in which there was a lot of mass incarceration. So I felt it was important from my position as the chief assistant district attorney that we should do something to the individuals that suffered these low-level criminal offenses, and they had these criminal offenses still remaining on their record. I felt it was important for the district attorney to get involved with an expungement clinic. So we partnered with the South Hayward NAACP and created an expungement clinic in which the question was asked, well, which district attorney should we have run this program to make sure it's successful? And of course, they said Terry Wiley, because I coordinated with the courts. I helped get the documents together, and we held an expungement clinics at the Hayward Library. And we were able to successfully expunge the criminal records of hundreds, literally hundreds of individuals who can now go apply for a job and say, I have no criminal record. The other issue, we met with the business communities of downtown Oakland and Berkeley. I also helped coordinate a meeting between the presiding judge and the business owners in downtown Oakland and downtown Berkeley. And what we were able to do is have a discussion on the crimes that are impacting their businesses and what the courts can do to implement a new bail schedule so that these individuals that are repeat offenders will stop repeat offending. So, but those are some of the things that you can do from the district attorney's position that can have a positive impact. And again,
Sorry to cut you off. We hit the 2-minute mark. All right, we'll be moving on to our next question for this round, which is currently in San Francisco. District Attorney Chesa Boudin has been under a year-round attack led and financed by the SFPOA. The unlimited amounts of money that flow into our electoral system can create a huge conflict of interest for many candidates in many elections, and it's very detrimental to our democracy. What role can the district attorney play in protecting our democracy and ensuring we have free and fair elections? And Mr. Stewart, you're up first.
I was wondering who was going to be leading this one, and I'm excited to get this opportunity. So first off, I just want to make this clear. I'm not accepting any money from law enforcement associations or unions. No organizations whatsoever. That's not going to happen. That makes it relatively, I think, straightforward. The reason why that becomes an issue is because it's an inherent conflict of interest. What if, for example, we run into a situation where the DA's office has to prosecute someone who is a member of one of those organizations who has given money to that campaign? The best way to deal with that situation is to not have it in the first place. And the way to do that is to just not accept money from law enforcement organizations. So that's what I'm doing. So that's number one. Number two, and all of this is in my platform at SethStewart4DA.com. And this particular point has to go with leading outside of the courtroom. We need to make elections fair. One of the ways to do that is to make sure that if you are convicted of a felony, that in no way inhibits your right to vote. In this regard, Florida is actually ahead of us. So California needs to step up its game, and I want to lead the charge to make sure that if you're convicted of a crime, that does not disenfranchise you in any way, shape, or form. So with regard to making free and fair elections, we need to make sure that we give felons the right to vote, and that we make sure that we don't take any money from law enforcement organizations. The last thing that I'll say is the DA's office actually needs to prosecute voter fraud. Now, on occasion, it does happen. It's a very rare thing, but it's something that we need to make sure that if we become aware of any actual issues, that we will look at them and then prosecute them. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, you have the floor.
Yes, this is conflict of interest is it's present everywhere. In taking money from police officers, taking money from unions, even taking money from people in the general public. The one thing that I know that's going on in my office right now is that people are soliciting money and soliciting people's time to participate in the current election. I believe that's wrong. I believe when you're in a position of power, there is a sure conflict of interest. You are putting pressure on your employees to support you when maybe they don't. Maybe they feel like if I don't do this, I'll be retaliated against. I believe that the appearance of impropriety is present whenever there is an intermingling between labor unions, people with power over other people, individuals who are looking for favors down the road. That is why when we look at elections in a broader sense, why people are so disgusted with politics is because of all the special interests, because of all the conflicts of interest. We need to put a stop to that. Everyone who participates in this process should take an oath to always do their job ethically, not take advantage of their position of power, and to always do things in mind with how is this perceived by the general public? How is this perceived by other people? How fair is this to other candidates when you do things like that? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Wiley, you have the floor for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, we are not taking any money from police officer associations. We will accept their endorsement, but we are not taking any money because I do think it is an inherent conflict, because as a district attorney, we do have cases that come across our desk in which we have to consider whether or not, or we have to review the actions of police officers. So I think it's an inherent conflict, which is why we're not taking any money. And in terms of protecting our democracy, I do think it's important that we make sure that we have fair elections. And some of the comments that Mr. Wilson just made, what I find interesting is that every organization, whether it be a labor union, whether it be the district attorneys, Teamsters union, he went before them just like I did, seeking their endorsement. So did Ms. Price. And so, we all are sought the endorsements of labor. Now, maybe he finds a problem with it now is because I've got the majority of the endorsements from labor. I'm not sure, but I don't see any problem. That's part of our political system, and that, these organizations have an interest in our political system, and that's why they're active in the political system. But I do think that, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that elections are fair to everyone.
Great, thank you. Ms. Price, you're up next.
Sure, this question is very timely and appropriate for Alameda County in particular. As we know, yes, the San Francisco POA has attacked CHASA, much as POAs across the country have attacked progressive candidates seeking to reform the criminal justice system, because they represent the status quo. And certainly in Alameda County, as in most district attorneys' offices, the police unions have had a significant role in the policies of the district attorney. And that is so true in Alameda County. In fact, the current district attorney and her campaign are under investigation by the FPPC, the Fair Political Practices Commission, as well as the grand jury of Alameda County, for violating the fundamental rules of fairness in the 2018 campaign by cooperating and colluding together specifically against our campaign. And so we know that this Alameda County deserves and needs an ethical leader that will follow the laws, that will not break the laws. In California Penal Code Section 424 specifically makes it a felony for a county employee to use county resources or on county time to campaign on behalf of any political candidate. And that's exactly what has been happening in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office, not only from 2017, when Mr. Wiley's first email shows that he was helping the spying essentially for District Attorney O'Malley, all the way to 2021, where we see emails continuing that pattern. And so as your district attorney, I will lead in an ethical manner. I'm the only one that is corporate free and that has taken the no cop money pledge. As a civil rights litigator, I understand the detriment of Citizens United on our democracy, and I will fight against it.
Thank you for that. We are entering our last question in round two. I placed it in the chat. It is, what best practices have you seen coming out of other district attorneys' offices that you'd like to put in place in Alameda County on day one? And we'll begin with Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. One of the, about 2 years ago, I read about a program that George Gascon started in San Francisco. It was this community court that what that program did is that the community was involved in any kind of dispute with any person who was charged with a crime. What I am talking about in my platform, one of the things that I want to do is have a community-based criminal justice system, a system that involves the community with like diversion, with like programs like mental health, with survivors, victims of violent crime. I talked about earlier about the fact that there are 500 unsolved murders in the city of Oakland. It's important that we have an organization within the community that is willing to assist individuals in that sense. I think that community courts, having a community-based criminal justice system, will solve a lot of our problems the distrust that a lot of people have with the system itself. A lot of people don't even realize what the district attorney does. They don't realize the impact that they have. One of the things that happened with that court, with the court that George Gascon started, is that the satisfaction between both the victims and the defendants was really high. They really liked the interaction. They liked restorative justice. I think that's something that we can do on the front end to reduce both the incarceration rate and the distrust of the public of the system itself. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. Mr. Wiley, you have 2 minutes.
Yes, well, I think I stated earlier, I think that it is imperative that the next district attorney address the level of violence that is taking place in the community. And that includes murders, violent assaults with firearms. That has got to be addressed. And so I feel it's day one, we are going to implement the crime strategies unit. That will be a unit of deputy district attorneys, of some of our most talented deputies, who are going to focus in conjunction with the Oakland Police Department's ceasefire unit and focus on those 1,700 individuals that are driving 80% of the violent crime in our county. Now, those individuals will first be given an opportunity. And that's what we do at ceasefire. We bring those individuals in. We explain to them that here are some educational opportunities that we can provide. Here are some job opportunities that we can provide. And all we ask is that you turn your guns in and you come out of the culture that you're currently involved in. Some take advantage of it, which has led to a decrease in the number of violent offenses. That was all impacted by the pandemic, in that the resources kind of dried up during the pandemic. And we're now getting ceasefire back up and running. But if they refuse to turn their guns in and find a different path, then they will be focused on by the criminal justice system, because we are going to lower the homicide rate and the rate of violence in the city of Oakland in particular. That would be my first initiative, day one.
Great. Ms. Price, you're up next.
Sure, thank you. In 2017, I had the opportunity to meet with George Gascon, as well as the designer of the Neighborhood Courts program in San Francisco that Mr. Wilson referenced. I can tell you day one, we won't be able to establish neighborhood courts, but what we can do prior to day one is to evaluate the criteria for the current alternative courts that exist in Alameda County. One, looking at the criteria for those, and two, looking back to determine those people that were denied the opportunity to participate in those courts and make sure that we create opportunities to decarcerate people from going to Santa Rita jail or bearing onerous burdens when it's not really necessary to restore them to the community. Our platform is all about restorative justice and using the alternative courts as well as the neighborhood courts program that we will establish to create better justice and safer communities for Alameda County. I've looked at what Larry Krasner has done in Philadelphia, as well as Kim Fox in Chicago around bail reform. And we can initiate that kind of reform on day one to create a pretrial evaluation system that does not require us to keep 86% of the people in Santa Rita County Jail without actually being convicted of anything. We've got to address unconstitutional bail on day one. Our goal is to be elected in June with 50+1, and then to create a series of interdisciplinary commissions that will look at the progressive policies of prosecutors like myself, as well as what works, what we need in Alameda County. And that's what we'll do. We'll deal with reentry services immediately, as well as victim services, establishing a victim services advisory board.
Thank you. And Mr. Stewart, you're last.
So I've had an opportunity to review a lot of the policies from across the country. And so I'm very excited to have an opportunity to use the information that we have from all across the country and bring those practices here to Alameda County. What does that mean in practice? Under George Gascon in Los Angeles, he created a crime victims advisory board. We need to do that here in Alameda County. He also decided to not only end the death penalty, but also use a resentencing tool to look at whether or not all the people on death row should get life without the possibility of parole. That should also happen to the over 40 people on death row from Alameda County. From Mike Schmidt in Portland, Oregon, we learned to be smarter on crime and to follow the science. He has a dashboard where he produces all of the information, that all of the decision-making information. And so the public of Multnomah County, that's where Portland, Oregon is can be able to review all of the information and the decisions by the DA's office. We know from Kim Fox that we need to, in Chicago, that we need to focus on violent crimes, that our resources have to go to violent crimes. And we need to be able to make sure that our prosecutors and our investigators and our legal secretaries and our paralegals have the resources necessary to prosecute those cases. And finally, from Larry Krasner, we learned to fight racism and bias in the system. We need to be able to hire robustly from historically Black colleges and universities. We need to be able to fight hate crimes. We need to be able to make sure we focus on creating a task force that will look at exactly the decision-making that creates inequities and then end those inequities. Those are the things that we need to focus on, and these are the opportunities that we have and the programs to bring from around the country here to Alameda County. And as district attorney, I look forward to the opportunity to do just that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, candidates, for those answers, those questions. We're now entering round 3. Just to keep things fun and spicy, we call this round the hot seat. So we'll be asking a series of questions targeted for specific candidates. You'll be given 90 seconds to answer. And we'll be stringent on the time. We're going to begin with Mr. Stewart. I'm going to read this question aloud. I will not post them in the chat, and you yourself will be the only one to respond. The question is, out of all the candidates, you have the least amount of experience, and your prosecutorial experience was in San Francisco County, not Alameda, and you entered the race much later than others who've been in the race, and you've never run a campaign of this magnitude before. How do you plan on reaching the over 1 million voters in Alameda County when you started from an inherent disadvantage from the other campaigns?
Quite simply, the change needs to happen. The system is broken, and I think that the message that I'm sending, if you listen and you have an opportunity to look at the 12 points of the platform, it has value. When we talk about ending or eliminating cash bail, ending the death penalty, expanding victims' rights, prosecuting officers who violate the law, these things resonate with people, whether they live in Newark or Castro Valley, whether you live in Albany or Livermore. Everybody cares about being safe. We need to be able to focus on violent crimes. And I think that every time I get an opportunity to say these things, they resonate because it makes sense. This is, to me, an opportunity for reasonable, effective change. And as a person who has spent 13 years prosecuting cases, I feel confident in my ability to do just that. As someone for the last 8 years was a flight engineer on a combat search and rescue helicopter, I feel confident to be able to bring change to make Alameda County safer and more just. As someone who is a teacher, a public school teacher, and a policy leader who's written laws, I feel confident in my ability to make a difference. And I think that this message and these things, that my viewpoint matters and these experiences resonate because it equals making Alameda County safer and more just. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. Next, we have Mr. Wilson. Again, you'll have 90 seconds to respond to this question. The question is, you have presented yourself thus far as a preferred candidate of the police. With police accountability being a longstanding problem of our county and our country, what is your plan to convince voters that you can be trusted to hold the police accountable when you're their preferred candidate?
Thank you. To be the DA in Alameda County, you have to have a relationship with all the criminal justice partners, not just the police, but defense attorneys and public defenders. You have to be respected by the judiciary. One of the reasons why it was important to me to have the support of the police is because in order to change what they've been doing, the practices that they've been doing, you have to have a dialogue. I talked a little bit about what I'm doing proactively through the NAACP, not through my office, but through an organization that's been around for over 100 years. We've going to every single police department and talking to them about implicit bias and community policing. The reason why I'm doing that is because I came from an underserved community who distrust the police. In order to change attitudes about policing, you have to be proactive. You have to get down on the ground floor and try to get police officers to change their patterns, to learn how to do it better. When you ask why would you trust that I'm going to prosecute police officers, is because I always follow the law. I am a part of our OIS, the Officer Involved Shooting Team. I've investigated police officers for shooting through my career, and I have never wavered in following the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Wiley. Again, you'll have 90 seconds. I'm going to ask this question, and it's going to be great. Some would say that you have a controversial record as a prosecutor, and now you've been implicated in a current grand jury investigation. What is your plan to get voters to overlook those grievances and earn their trust as one of the county's DA's candidates?
Okay, I'm not exactly sure what you mean about a controversial record, but in terms of the grand jury, and first of all, I really appreciate that question, because if you look at the 2018 election, I was not involved in Miss O'Malley's reelection campaign at all. And if you look at the date that I sent that email, it was 2 weeks before the election. Now, because I am a leader in the office, Miss Price was basically representing that the district attorney's office was pretty much primarily all white. And lawyers of color came to me to express that they were unhappy that our office was being misrepresented by Miss Price. And I said, okay, well, you know, and I was previously our director of recruitment and development. So, you know, we actually took that personal because we have more African-American prosecutors in the Alameda County DA's office than the other 6 surrounding counties combined. And so I sent an email to all of the African-American DAs and basically said, hey, they're having a candidates forum. And if you're concerned about our office being misrepresented as having no lawyers of color, you can attend that event. That's what I did. And I realized that, you know, I should not have used our email to send that email, but that's what that was all about. It was really, well,
Thank you for your response. Lastly, we have Ms. Price. Again, you'll have 90 seconds to respond to this question. And it is, in 2018, you ran for DA and the police unions assembled together and spent over $1 million sending out hit pieces on you. Already in this cycle, we've seen your opponents repeating these same tactics and attacks you faced in 2018. What is your campaign's plan in this cycle to overcome the tremendous amount of money that will be spent smearing you and convince voters you have the experience and courage to get this job done?
Sure. We recognize that there was foul play in the 2018 election, not only in the amount of money that came pouring in, and keep in mind that money came because a poll was issued showing that we were 10 points ahead of the incumbent. And that's when the police unions came here and they colluded with Miss O'Malley and her staff, to her campaign staff, as well as the DA's staff, to develop and publish those hit pieces that were disseminated in primarily South County. So our strategy has been, we started in South County as the only candidate who's run a county-wide race now. I understand how to reach out to voters across the county and where we need to go to have those conversations. And we're going door to door. We started campaigning and knocking doors in Fremont last April. And we have teams in Fremont, in Castro Valley, in Berkeley, in Oakland, and in Union City. And we intend to talk to voters and tell them, if you see my picture on my head on top of a woman with a bikini and half naked, don't believe it's me. It's not. And that's basically what we're going to tell them. Don't believe the lies that you're going to hear, including some I've heard tonight, like about misrepresentations of what was actually the subject of the grand jury investigation. So.
Great. Thank you so much, candidates, for answering these questions. Again, I will reiterate, I did not write these questions, but was simply asked as an impartial host. So please, thank you so much. You will now be given 1 minute for closing statements. Again, we do ask that you respect everybody's time. We'll begin with Mr. Wiley. You have 1 minute for a closing statement.
well, once again, I want to thank Fund Progressives for this opportunity. You know, this job is a very important job. You know, you have to be someone who can manage $100 million budget. You have to have experience, and not only in the criminal justice system, but you also have to be experienced with the consumer and environmental protection. You also have to serve as a leader across the country, because Oakland is, and Alameda County is, one of the offices that people around the country look to for leadership in terms of our criminal justice system. And you can be innovative, and I am that person. You know, I'm the only one that's run our juvenile justice division. I've run every office in the criminal division, and I'm now the chief assistant. And again, the first African-American in the history of Alameda County. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Wilson. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. You know, throughout my career, I've handled myself with honesty, integrity, and ethics. I've always put the safety of the community over my own personal desires. I believe that justice requires that we carry ourselves with respect and dignity. One of the problems that I have with what's happening right now was just displayed today. I did not agree to participate in anything in 2018. I was coerced into showing up, and Mr. Wiley was the person who was behind that. That is a problem of leadership. That's a problem with our office. Anyone can give you a position of power, but to be a leader, you have to carry yourself with honesty, dignity, and ethics. And that's what I'm going to do as Alameda County District Attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Stewart, you'll have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Thank you for this opportunity to have this conversation. Also, let me say happy Black History Month. I hope everybody has had an opportunity to learn something that you didn't know about the history of America and the history of Black folks here. I am the best candidate to change this office and to be your next district attorney. My diverse lived experiences as a proven prosecutor, decorated veteran, public school teacher, and policy leader stand out and give me a distinct understanding of and viewpoint of the criminal justice system and the district attorney's office. From a voter's perspective, there's a fairly large middle lane for reasonable, thoughtful change. And make no mistake, change is necessary. The system is broken, and the DA's office is a part of that system. Thank you for your consideration, for allowing me into your home and to have a conversation about criminal justice in Alameda County. Please go to SethStewardForDA.com to learn more. My name is Seth Stewart, and I humbly ask you for your vote.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Ms. Price. You have 1 minute.
Thank you for having us. As a civil rights attorney, I've dedicated my life to fighting for justice, representing everyday people, had a great legal career. I love being a trial lawyer. I love being a lawyer, and I love serving people. I decided to run for this seat because prosecutors have been at the heart of mass incarceration, and the prosecutors in Alameda County have forgotten that their mission is to protect public safety by advancing justice. I am honored and excited to be the only woman in this race. Black women are incarcerated 26 times, or 26% of all incarcerated women in this state, where we represent less than 6% of the population. So there's long past time for us who have been at the bottom of this criminal justice system and prey to it. And I've been fighting since I started as working for legal services for prisoners with children. I've been fighting for the rights of women and family and children, and I will do so as your next district attorney. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, candidates, for taking the time to join us. Thank you for having me as your host. Looking forward to be back. And then to everyone out there, please go vote in this election. Thank you.
All right, everyone, we didn't go too far over. It was only 2:09. Thank you, Kunal, for guest moderating for us. I want to thank all the candidates for coming. As I mentioned earlier, last time we had a candidates forum, Pamela was the only one that showed up. So this was much different. So we had a great time with all of you. As I told my membership in our newsletter, if any of you would like to stay and discuss, if you have questions about any of the endorsement races or anything like that, please feel free to stay and we can talk about it. Everybody else, you have to leave. Sorry, it's membership only. And with that being said, good night. Enjoy your Sunday evening, and let's all have a very wonderful and blessed week moving forward.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, candidates, for joining us.